Hi there. In this video we will look into how we can test basic values like numbers, strings, and truth-is state of our code. Let's begin. So what I have in front of me is a very simple test file. So we're using the strict and warning pragmas at the top, and then we are using the test most module that says that we have no plan. We don't know how many tests we're going to run. And then we are just finishing our test run by saying done testing. So we want to write tests in between, as we saw in the previous video. And what we're going to do, we're just going to explore basic keywords, how we can test simple numbers, strings, and truth-is state of our code. The first thing we're going to do, we're actually going to introduce a new file. We are going to keep our code. Because if you think about it, we are testing a code logic, which is going to live in module file, script file. We're not going to have the code logic in the test file. We want to pull the script logic in our test file. So let's do this properly. If you're using Visual Studio Code, go to your File Explorer on the left-hand side and create a new file. So I'm creating this new file under the root folder, which is currently called Perl course. So I'm not creating a file under the test directory, and I'm just going to call this script.pl. And as we already know, we're just going to start by introducing a shebang line by saying user bin environment Perl, use strict and use warnings that we have done many times before. And then we're just going to return the truthy value. And what we're going to do here, we're just going to introduce a simple method such as sub number, where we are going to return, let's say, number 2, and sub string, where we are going to return, let's say, cat. If we save this file and we go back to our test file, now the first question is how we can actually pull in our script file logic in our test file. By default, we could use required to require a script file, but in order to require and test that requiring a file was okay, we can use require underscore okay, and then the name of our file. Well, not really just the name of the file, but we actually want to use the absolute path. So I'm going to right click on the script file and copy the full path. I go back to the test file and paste this here, save the file and run the prove command, which is prove test directory for test, and run this. We're going to see that all tests pass. Now, how do we know that we actually have this logic available in our test file? Well, let's use a new keyword to test values, which is called is. And is simply takes produced value by your code logic, then the second argument, what is expected, and the third optional argument, which is just a debugging line, an explanation of how you want to describe your test. Let's start by testing the number function. We know that our number function returns 2. So let's go to our test file and call function number, which should be automatically imported since we're requiring the script file. And this is the function that we're calling, returning a value. Then we're saying what we expect this function to return. So we are expecting to return number 2, which is over here. And then we can add an optional comment. For example, got the expected number. All right, if we save this and run the test file, we're going to see that all tests pass. So we called our number function from our script file, which is defined here. We expected number 2, and we actually got that number. So if we change the expected value to 1 and rerun the test file, we're now going to see that our test fails. And our test failure actually tells us that what we got from the script logic, so the first value, which is from the number function, was 2, and that we expected a value of 1. Which is defined here. And then the third parameter, the optional one that we provided, we can see fail test got expected number. This is not only for the number, so you can also replace this to the string function, which we now expect to return cat. And if we remove the number and say that we expect a string cat, rerun the test, we're going to see that everything is okay. The same goes if we say, let's say, plural cats, save the file, rerun the test, we're going to see that it fails again. It expected cats, and what we actually got was cat. So got from the string function, which is cat, and expected cat, plural. Now, similar to its function, we can use isnt. And as you might have guessed, the isnt is actually opposite. So we expect a code logic to not return a value. And if it doesn't return the value that we provide as a second argument, then it should pass, right? So in this case, we know that our string function returns a cat. And let's say replace cats to a dog. And if we save this, rerun the test, it passes because, well, it returns a cat, right? It returns a string cat. And we say that we expect that the return value isn't a dog, well, a string dog, and which is true, right? We got a string of cat and we said we didn't expect dog, and that's true. So if I replace this to cat, now that means we are returning a string that contains a cat and we are expecting a cat, then this is going to fail because got cat, expected cat, and we said, well, it shouldn't be the expected value, which it is. I see how this can be confusing, but I hope you're following along. And just a note, we can also use this for numbers. So we know that our number function returns number 2. So we say that we don't want our expected value to be equal to 2, and we run the test. This is going to pass, and the opposite, so that it isn't 2, and well, it's going to be matching number 2, what is returned from the number function. We're going to see the test failure, because again, number function, as we defined before, returns number 2, and we are saying that we expect 2, which shouldn't be equal to the value returned from the number function, so the test fails. Another simple text function we can use is called like. Now, like accepts strings, so let's use our string function from the script file, and the second argument is not a direct string that we actually expect, but it wants you to provide the regex. So QR for quote regex, and here we're saying that whatever string we're returning from a function, we want it to be similar to what we provide in our regex. I'm going to replace actually this that says got expected number to got expected regex. Let's say that we expect this to be similar to CA and followed by any word letter. So if you run this, this should pass because our string is cat. So it starts with C and A, and the last letter should be anything which matches the letter T. So this stands for cat. We also can say that cat and dog in our string function. If we go back to our test file, just look for something in the middle which says and, rerun the script, is going to pass because we have and keyword just between the cat and the dog. So like function is very useful where you want to match for patterns in the return strings. And very similar to potentially confusing function that we looked at before, which is called isn't, you can use unlike. It works exactly the same as with numbers or strings in comparison, but it just uses regexes, right? So we're saying that we expect the returned value to not include a pattern which has and in it. So if we run the test, this is going to fail because, well, there's an and keyword in the string function that we're returning. But if we say isn't, or anything that is not part of the string function that returns cat and dog, this should pass. So since we are checking for isn't keyword that's not returned by the function, this is passing. Just to quickly reiterate, we looked at the OK function in the previous video, but to remind, we can also use OK keyword, which simply checks for truthy value. And if we run the number function and provide a test name, so let's say got truthy value, and run this, we're going to see the test pass. So you don't need to provide value directly to the OK function. You just expect any value from the functionality that we pull into our test file. Now, one final note to add is by default, you're not really going to see detailed information when you run tests with proof command with explicitly saying that you want descriptions of tests. You're just going to see the summary of the test, or of course, if it fails, you're going to actually see that extra details about the test that failed. Now, in order to see more information at your test run, even when it succeeds, you can run proof with v command for verbose, and then your test file, which is t or test or however you call your test file. If you run this now, you're going to see a bit more information in the test file, which is the command that we run to execute our test. And then we see that we run the require command for our script file, which is over here. And then there was a second test, so got truthy value, the number of tests, and it just says that everything was successful. If we add another test, which was is number, got expected number, which now we need to say that we expect the number to be 2. Save this, rerun the test file. You're going to see that there are 3 tests that pass. Alright, that's it for this video. We looked at how we can require script logic in our test file and how to test basic values. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.